quickly introduce themselves, affiliation, what their research is about, and make a couple of points with regards to what their presentations are about. That should take 2 to 3 minutes before we then jump into questions from audience. I have prepared myself a question that I might leave for later probably. For the audience, it would be great if you highlight your questions with a Q. Obviously, these chats have always been lively, and there's been a lot of conversations in the chat section. I will give the opportunity and the floor to those from the audience who have questions to voice them directly to the panelists. So without further ado, I'm giving the floor to Karin Edberg, who's going to have who had a presentation on e-bike as mobility practices.
Yes, exactly. Just to say something short about myself, I work at Linköping University in Sweden as an assistant professor, and I have my background in sociology, but I used to work more with energy-related infrastructural siting, but now my previous project is more about mobility, and then e-biking in particular. So that was what my presentation was about. So it discusses e-biking in relation to other mobility modes, but focusing on commuting with e-bikes. And I discuss it as a part of the system of automobility, but also as an alternative then to the car. But also as an alternative or in relation to conventional cycles, where I would argue that at least in some respects, the e-bike is another type of practice than conventional cycling, as it includes different elements and therefore creates another type of flexibility. I think I stopped there.
Okay, thank you very much, Karin. It was very interesting to see your discussions about the system of automobility and where potential e-bike system would fit in running in parallel or being able to take over. I think that's an interesting debate there. And I was just thinking in relation to the research I'm doing myself on cycle deliveries. There's a lot of e-bikes being used by many people doing such jobs, and at least in the UK, in Manchester, I haven't seen that many e-bikes before these platforms came around. So I was wondering to what extent we can think about this as a potential momentum for e-biking. Thank you very much. I'm going to give the floor now to João, who's gonna be discussing a bit his presentation on bike sharing and the pandemic.
Thank you. So my name is João Teixeira. I'm a PhD student in spatial planning at the University of Porto, Portugal. And as my research is on bike sharing systems, so more specifically, I'm interested in analyzing the contribution of these systems to increase the sustainability and resilience of our urban transport systems. In the presentation that I have submitted to Cycling and Society, I mostly focused on the resilience aspect by looking at the role of bike sharing during the present coronavirus pandemic. And so I use as case study the bike sharing system of Lisbon, which is entitled Gira, and I employed a travel behavior survey to its users with two main research objectives. On the one hand, to analyze the impact of COVID-19 on the mobility patterns of the bike sharing users, and also to analyze if the perceptions and motivations for using the systems have shifted due to coronavirus. I was particularly interested on the relationship of bike sharing with public transport, because as we all know, public transport systems have been particularly affected by the pandemic, and as such, we are facing the risk of a modal shift from public transport to the private car. And my research provided some interesting findings in that regard. First of all, it support that bike sharing can act as a substitute to public transport during COVID-19, and more importantly, can minimize a certain car use by preventing some public transport users from shifting to the private car. For instance, we analyzed modal shift dynamics induced by bike sharing, and we found out that the percentage of users who before the pandemic, if bike sharing was not available, will use public transport. Now they will use the private car. And so one of our main recommendations is that policymakers should consider these type of systems during the pandemic, for instance, by deploying additional stations near public transport routes to minimize this shift. That will be my main point.
Okay, João, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. And somehow the results are not surprising, but at the same time, probably many municipalities have not really considered this advices that you are providing in your research with regards to the disinfection that needs to be in place, or redistributing these fleets to reflect new mobility patterns. And I was thinking also, where are the dockless bike sharing system in this discussion as well? I'm not sure how this works in Lisbon, but maybe we can have a discussion in the Q&A session about this. And last but not least, we will be hearing from Florian Egerman and Kath Stewart, and a very interesting project they have been coordinating, actually. So they are not just they are not researcher in this particular context, but they come from a practitioner's perspective. Please, Florian and Kath, you have the floor.
Thank you. Kath, do you want to start?
Okay, my name's Kath Stewart. I'm from Ilkley, which is a small town in West Yorkshire, and we are introducing a commons cargo bike sharing scheme in Ilkley. And I got the idea from Florian's commons cargo bike scheme in Europe. And if you look on his presentation, we are the one pin in the UK on the commons cargo bike. So yes, it's about introducing it, and it's a bit of an uphill struggle here at the moment, but I'm sure we will get there. So Florian, you.
Thanks. Thanks very much for the invitation. Also, we are a bit I don't know, as you already said, and as the presentation shows, we are much more practitioners than, or we are not scientists. Full stop. So but we are also very interested in how to connect the systems we are building, the commons cargo bike sharing system, the data that is produced, how we can how other people can use that data to make some arguments for our way of sharing bikes and so forth. And so I was really interested in the resilience aspect also of the projects. How long do they run? We are donation based, right? But still the projects, our project runs since 2013. So it is kind of, you could make the argument that it's kind of resilient. Yeah, but we are here. We have a more or less clear political agenda to improve the city, and and I'm super excited to hear the other insights about what the data actually says.
Thank you very much, Flo and Kath. I was really inspired by your presentation, actually, and I made loads of connections with similar such initiatives within the cycling world. For example, there's a Coop Cycle. I'm just going to share the link, which is an organization that has kind of created a similar momentum as yours in Germany with regards to creating a platform for deliveries that is open source and more kind of led by cooperative ideas, and more political in this sense. So I was just thinking about this. Very interesting presentations. Thank you very much for this. I think we can already kick off with a Q&A session. I don't see a lot of discussions, comments, questions in the chat as of yet, so I might as well come up with a question I have had in mind as I was going through the presentations that that each and every one of you has prepared for this and uploaded on our website. I think the question of tipping point was an interesting one that I wanted to pick on, and I think it was in Karin's presentation with regards to the e-bike and the pandemic as being a potential tipping point for an e-bike revolution, as we might say. I think João also kind of alluded to this in his presentation of the bike sharing system and how the pandemic could could have acted as a tipping point for more cycling, more bike sharing systems being more popular. And obviously, I think Florian's and Kat's very passionate advocacy for common in cargo bikes is very interesting. And to what extent, I think the question is there, we can think of grassroots initiatives kind of getting to creating this tipping point for having a cargo bike revolution. So it would be great if you could make some comments on this.
I can I can start perhaps. I will just say that for sure regarding bike sharing systems, what we are seeing is that they have already recovered their ridership levels comparatively to the pre-pandemic levels, while comparatively to public transport systems still have lower ridership levels. So I think bike sharing can perhaps even start to be accepted as a new public transport mode, because it's still not very considered by public authorities, and in that sense it can stop people from shifting from the public transport to the private car, and that should be more considered by the policymakers, which is something that is still not very well accepted. That would be my main point.
Yeah, I think it was very interesting to see these changes in modal shift from public transportations to cycling and the use of bike sharing system, obviously, but we still see that this is not necessarily the case with where the problem lies to an extent, the car and modal share of cars in cities, which didn't necessarily get affected by the pandemic.
Exactly. I could also, okay, sure.
Maybe
you want to continue?
Yes, please, Karin, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, when I noted that the pandemic could be a potential tipping point, maybe I just tried to be as positive as possible. I'm not sure that I actually think that it will be, but what I think it can do is to show us that other ways of traveling is possible, and also showing like the weak points. And also showing maybe the weak points in public transport more than anything, because at the same time, like car driving also increased a lot during the pandemic in general, even though people in general drove less of everything because they didn't commute that much. But I mean, I think we can learn how we would like to travel, but also like the problems with the system in general, that we have to travel so far to get to work, to leisure, to shop, and it's more of that we have to discuss, I think, how we spend our time traveling.
Okay, thank you, Karin. I was wondering if Flo and Kath want to add to this. Where do they see the tipping point coming from?
I think there was some. This is more like my feeling than any kind of data, but I think there was kind of this this new situation that we found ourselves in, with this kind of threat that was hanging over us, and of course a few people, or the data chose the bike as a means of safely traversing the city. And one of the questions that I had while listening to this is, of course, if there are more bikes on the street, does the administrative side of the city, do they kind of answer this by, in Berlin, for example, they kind of converted one more lane to a bike lane because they said there are more bikes, for example. And I think it needs both that people change their behavior, but also there needs to be some kind of answer from the city that they recognize it. Okay, here's a chance. Or that they want this, really, right? If they see it and they say, okay, here's a chance, there are less cars there, we're gonna open this lane up for the bikes, then really change can happen, because otherwise I fear that we're kind of going back into our old habits once this is over.
I just want to say, I think there have been a lot, well, in the UK, certainly there've been a lot more sales of bikes, and particularly in Ilkley, electric bikes. Ilkley is quite a hilly place, and it has quite an elderly population as well. But there has, over the pandemic, I think, the bike shops have been, well, it's been impossible to buy a bike now because you have to order it, and it takes a long time to get one. But I think part of the problem we have is the lack of infrastructure. There isn't really any cycling infrastructure in Ilkley. I think there's one traffic light with an advanced stop line for cyclists. There aren't even painted on cycle lanes in Ilkley. But my take on that is, introducing cargo bikes, they have to introduce the infrastructure that fits for cargo bikes as well, because the normal cycle lanes aren't wide enough for cargo bikes. But I think it is this thing about safety. People would like to cycle, but they don't feel safe. And so it's a combination of those few brave souls who are willing to cycle, getting out there on their bikes, and then the authorities saying, yes, we must do something to support this.
These are very, very valid points, I think, and very, very important. I also had this kind of a question with regards to the project you have. I know the initiative in Manchester, where I am based, not currently, but I've been living there for some years. There's Chorlton Bike Deliveries, who are operating on a kind of a similar way. And I was wondering how your project manages to reach the more vulnerable, deprived communities, because in Chorlton, at least in Manchester, which is quite a well-off neighborhood, this is mainly a kind of a white middle class thing to do, being on a cargo bike and doing these kind of things. How do you see this happening in your case, and how are you addressing these issues of reaching more vulnerable, deprived communities?
Well, it's a donation-based system, so there is no fixed cost. And if you want to borrow the bike and you don't feel you can afford to pay anything, then you don't have to pay anything. Ilkley is not a very diverse town. It's quite a wealthy town. So, but we do have areas where there are definitely people who would struggle to afford to hire a bike at shop hire prices. So that was one of the important reasons for me of doing it as a donation-based system. It's just trying to advertise it to people as such, so that they know it's available to them, that anyone can actually borrow it. We're looking to try and fund a third bike that we can place on the other side of town, so that people will see, more people will see the bikes about. When we ride the bikes, people stop us and ask. They're quite unusual. It's quite unusual to see cargo bikes. So people do, if you're stopped at traffic lights, or if you're stopped locking the bike up, people will come and talk to you and say, oh, what's all this about? What you're doing. So we're just spreading the word, really. But hopefully it is within their means to be able to borrow it.
Okay, thank you. So I think now the chat section has become quite active. I see quite a lot of questions. I would give the floor to Xian Benoit to address a question which I think is particularly addressed to Karin, but I think everyone can contribute actually.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was wondering if, I think it's indeed mostly for Karin, if you see differences in the routes that are taken by e-bikes and normal bikes. Did you investigate this and have you an idea about this?
Yeah, definitely. It's quite obvious in my material that when you choose the e-bike is when you have longer commuting trips, for instance, and that includes like hilly areas, but also like where there's a lot of headwind, for instance, over bridges and things like that, so that you can, because that is what the assistance can help you with to overcome those things. So when it's only like flat ground, flat roads, then for many you could just as well take the conventional bike, but it's the hilly areas and where you have headwind and longer, where you have to travel longer. But also what it opens up, and that's why I argue that the e-bike gives more flexibility, is that you can alter the route depending on your mode, depending on the weather, depending on if you have to do something in between A and B, so to say, pick up goods or anything. So people then tend to, for instance, take the gravel road with a beautiful site and more hills if they have more time, but they could also take like the faster bike lane besides the motorway if they are in a hurry.
And did you also visualize those routes, or is it like qualitatively that that participants of the survey answered some examples of when they take the bike or when not, or do you really see where they are going?
Yeah, the material that I use is from diaries written by e-bikers. So it's not a visual tool in that sense, but it's diaries where they describe their trips, but also following like cycle interviews where I have followed a number of people when they go on their different commuting routes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for these comments and questions. We have another question here from Richard Nixon, who's, I think, anticipating a bit what we're going to be discussing the 1:30 panel, which focuses again on Greater Manchester. Richard, you have the floor to address the question on how to learn from other places about how to implement bike sharing systems in Manchester. Can you hear us, Richard? The microphone might be off. I think the microphone is muted. Can you hear us? Okay, so I might as well read a question myself because it seems that he has a technical issue. So Richard's question was, in Greater Manchester, we are about to launch our public bike share scheme. What demographics can we expect to be attracted to electric assist bikes compared to pure mechanical? And what evidence exists about critical mass effect in that the mere presence of the share scheme encourages continuity? I think it's a question for Karin, Joao as well.
Well, I can talk a bit about the Lisbon case study, because 2/3 of shared bicycles are e-bikes, and it was a winning bet because Lisbon is known as the city of the 7 hills, so very hilly terrain, and e-bikes are very popular. So we also analyzed on the travel survey that aspect, and e-bikes, both before and during COVID-19, were amongst the major motivations for people joining the system. So I didn't detect differences on the socio-demographics, but having an e-bike has a clearer advantages for the system in that aspect. And of course, you have more people can commute to greater distances, and also don't have also the barrier of becoming sweaty arriving at the destination, because Lisbon it can be very hot during December, so you have those advantages. And I can even say that regarding the users who have stopped using the system, the major reason for them was not so much the COVID-19, but lack of enough e-bikes for them to use. And as a consequence, the system is going to expand this year, and all of the bicycles will be e-bikes. They will buy all e-bikes. So I will say that it's a winning bet to have e-bike sharing systems, regardless of the city. And regarding the other part of the question on diversity, again, the example of Lisbon, we see, for instance, the municipality conducts bike counts, and about 1/3 of all bikes are shared bicycles. And more interestingly is that we see a larger female percentage using bike sharing than private bikes. So that can be a very important a sign to diversity, so we can have different types of cyclists in a city with the implementation of bike sharing system. I think also London did some studies on that issue, that it can improve and increase the diversity and the number of cyclists in a city by having a bike sharing system.
Thank you, João. Very, very interesting and hopefully useful insights for Manchester as well when the time comes. Karin, if you wanted to add as well something with regards to the electric part of the question.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know anything especially specifically on bike sharing systems, because I would think, or my guess is that it is a little bit different, the demographics of someone using a bike sharing system and someone buying a bike and using it for themselves, or maybe small within families or something like that, because as you are probably more, you have to be more convenient with using apps and like booking schemes and stuff like that if you have a bike sharing system, maybe if you don't take it just and also or living in a like city center where you have these bike sharing schemes on the street. So I can't say anything especially on that, and I also don't have statistics. That's not what my research is about, but I would say that it's common for commuting reasons to use e-bikes, but also maybe for people that for different reasons not are able to bike or cycle longer distances on a conventional bike, if you have a disability or something like that. So commuters, predominantly white collar commuters, that don't want to be sweaty and also don't have to bring a lot of tools and equipment and things like that maybe craftspersons need to do, and a little bit elderly people with disabilities.
Thank you both, João and Karin. I think these are very good advices and insights into these matters. We have here more of a comment from Peter Cox with regards to the language you use when we talk cycling, and I would like him to take the floor and address his comment.
Hi. Yeah, it was just something that I think it was Kath, sort of, it's limited to those willing and able. And actually, I think we really need to take seriously the fact that a lot of people who ride for practical purposes, it's not about willingness or ableness. You got to do it or you don't get there. It's straightforwardly as simple as that. They either can't drive anymore or don't for whatever reason, they don't have a license to drive. So it's not a question of willingness. It's not a question of bravery. It's a question of you've just got to do it. And I think we're kind of I don't know what my point is, but I think we're sort of missing out something while we kind of think of them either as brave souls or campaigner. Yes, they are doing that, but not because they want to, not because they kind of desire to be brave souls or figures. It's just because you got to do it. That's how it is. If you live with an impairment, for example, it's not a question of being brave and overcoming it. It's just you got to deal with it. And I think there's something that we might need to kind of connect up with a bit with more strongly with critical disability studies perspectives to actually grasp what's going on there. It was just an observation, really. I'll shut up.
I think it's a welcomed one, actually, because the language we use when we discuss cycling being normal or abnormal as a practice has a lot to do with the language we use when describing these practices and those who are indeed doing them.
And that normality comes back to the insights from critical disability studies. Who's being normalized, whose experiences and perceptions and expectations of the world are being normalized, and that comes back to the comment that was made earlier about government. What is the role of what should be the role of government? It was made in the previous session. I'll shut up. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter, very much for the comment. I think we're gonna stay with Flo and Kath. There's a question from Danielle for them. Danielle, if you want to step in and address the question yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Cosmin. As I wrote here, I'm curious about the community and how it grew and how you maintain kind of volunteer or member engagement. Don't know how you call the people that that kind of maintain your cargo bike program, because I'm really interested in grassroots initiatives, the organization, and the potential for change that they can induce on different scales and levels, and particularly this question of volunteer engagement, recruitment, but also organization in general seems to be a rather reoccurring one. Whereas in projects such as yours with specialty bikes or cycles such as cargo bikes, they seem to be rather successful with the peer-to-peer model that you seem to run. So I'm just curious generally about the organization. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question, Danielle. Flo and Kath, if you want to comment on this.
Well, I'll just say we're very new, so we have a small group of startup people at the moment, and what happened was we decided we wanted to get the bikes. We applied for funding to buy the bikes, and then it's all grown from there. People have kind of been attracted to it, and we are working to get training for our members from the bike shop that sold the bikes to us so that we can maintain them ourselves. But Flo will have much more experience of this because his system has been running for years. We've only been up and running since May this year, so.
It's both the individual initiatives and like the bigger movement that kind of need to be sustained, right? And there's, of course, we are now at 140 initiatives, So there are a few that kind of started out, and then there's a group, and sometimes this group disbands, and then the initiative closes, or you don't find somebody to take it over or something. This in general happens, but I think that most initiatives stay working and stay productive and lend out their bikes, mostly because they run their own under their own flag, so to say. So they have their own branding. We're not saying, hey, you have to be Commons Cargo Bikes Ilkley, or you have to be Commons Cargo Bikes London or something. They can be whatever. They can be called Casimir, or they can pick another name for their initiative. So it's always local. There's much more engagement if people feel, hey, yeah, this is a bike that's from our city. It's sprung from our group or our community, and also that I feel there's a lot of different things, different tasks, so to say, in the project where a lot of people can come together. So there's a logo to make, to design. There's a website to do. There are these technical aspects around it. But then also there's a bike to buy and to maintain, and there's the locations who have to give out the bikes and so forth. And there's other advertisement around it and some administrative things, but very different tasks where a lot of different people, at least in my experience, can connect to a project like this. So that's yeah, and of course what I feel the freedom to really design and think how you want to do it, how you put the bikes out, have your own website and something. I think that drives engagement, and that drives new initiatives to start.
Okay, thank you, Flo and Kath, and I really think that's what's special about such initiatives, this kind of a generosity where you let your members have their own branding and operate autonomously, and also this know-how that you pass on. And as you rightly said, even if somebody decides to go away, somebody else can come and pick it up, because this knowledge has been documented and shared indeed. I was just looking if there's any more questions. I think there's another one for Kath again from Einar. If you wanted to address this question directly, Einar, to Kath, please.
Yes, Einar. It is. The question is, like, do you get support of local businesses where you advertise and earn money with it? So more or less, the businesses can advertise for you and saying that you are around, and you also receive money off them. So, I mean, that broadcasts is a lot more, and it's also financially also quite more viable, isn't it? So that's my thing. It's like, if you can tie in local businesses, whoever, they can say, look, we got this group who will hold, we can transport our goods with, or we support them. So I don't know.
Okay, well, we do have the support of some of the local businesses. The way the schemes work is the bikes are stationed at particular places, and 2 local businesses have offered to look after the bikes and see that when people come to collect them, hand the keys over. So yes, there is that support, and one of them is more of a warehouse type place, so perhaps people wouldn't see that so much, but the other one is a local hardware store. A lot of people go there, so they have our cards there to advertise it for people to join. And yeah, it's right in the town centre, so the bikes are seen riding away. But we've also made a connection with our Ilkley Business Improvement District, and we're trying to encourage businesses to think about using them for the last mile delivery, to allow businesses to make a business case for getting their own cargo bikes to prove to themselves that this works.
Okay.
So hopefully we will have that. And also we have a local monthly market called Ilkley Real Food Market. And we advertise the bikes at that every month. People can come and try them out. But also the market are interested in using the bike to deliver things, that people order or buy from the market. So it's a slow process, but we are starting to get business connections.
Have you got loads of DIY stores there? That's where you also can advertise for larger goods, where people don't have a car.
No, we don't have any DIY stores except for the hardware store.
Okay, sorry. It was just, and then also the other thing is, have you been in touch with the chambers of commerce?
Yes, we have, but nothing has come of that at the moment. But the kind of business improvement district is kind of a much more local thing. There isn't, Ilkley itself doesn't have a chamber of commerce. It's based in Bradford, it covers Ilkley. So Bradford is the big city nearby.
Okay.
So really the business improvement district committee, they're kind of in lieu of that, I think, really.
All right, thank you very much for the answers then.
Okay, thank you very much for these questions and the discussions. I was having a look at the chat, not many questions. I think I might have a question that's probably related to Karin's presentation, but maybe with Flo and Kat as well. There's on the one hand we have the cargo bike deliveries and initiatives such as yourself, which are grassroots. On the other hand, we have companies such as Amazon who are trying to get into this business of last mile deliveries, and they have the capital and the potential to indeed come and take over these niches. And to an extent, I think it was more with regards to what João's presentation was about, the private companies, again, Silicon Valley backed that come or Chinese investment funds that come and drop bicycles with these floating schemes. Where do you see the fight here? How do you see these struggles that are inherent to such niches where these big players with money from investment funds are coming and potentially invading these markets? I was wondering if you have any thoughts on this.
I think if there's it should not be Amazon for me, probably, but if another company comes in that establishes a perfectly functional, great cargo bike sharing with enough bikes in every street for all the people to run and ride, then I would sort of say my work is sort of done. We will still run our little donation-based system, continue to run it, because as we said earlier, that some people cannot afford it. Some people still want to try it out for free, different models and stuff like that. So there's still a space for that. But in general, I would be super, there needs to be, I think the donation-based system, our system, and the commercial can go hand in hand. There are different, this is sort of, we really try to make, to have like an ad campaign for cargo bike sharing. And if that leads to that new companies come into the city and establish a parallel system that's more about hourly renting with very expensive, very fast e-bikes or something, e-cargo bikes, then I'm all for it. This happened to us in Cologne, actually. So we have these two systems and they work great together. So I encourage how do you say that? Disruption. Disruption in the cargo bike sharing market in Cologne. There is still space.
Thank you very much, Flo.
Can I just...
Yes, please, Kath.
I think there are probably two different groups here. I mean, there's the businesses, but there's also residents that need to be able to borrow a cargo bike. The vast majority of people couldn't afford to buy an e-cargo bike and wouldn't want to for the number of times they would use it. But to have a community scheme where they can just borrow one when they need it is really helpful. With regards to the businesses, I mean, we are a very small town. Our population is less than 15,000, between 14 and 15,000. So we couldn't persuade big business to start a car sharing scheme here. And I don't think we'd be able to persuade them to start an e-bike sharing scheme either. So I think it's unlikely that they're going to move in here. And for the local businesses, I know there are local grants for them to buy cargo bikes from the local authority, but they have to present a business case, and that's where we come in to help them make their business case.
Thank you very much, Kath and Flo. I'm not sure if João, you wanted to add something to this.
Yeah, especially regarding dockless bike sharing systems, I can say that, of course, they can have a very important role. And I know that, for instance, in China, they are the major players. They have thousands of bicycles that are used every day, but they also have problems that should be addressed. And for me, one of the most important ones is the reliability. So a private company comes to the city, but after a few months, it gives up and leaves the city. This happened in Lisbon. So we had two bike sharing systems. One, which is my case study, and it's owned by the municipality. Then we had the Jump, which was an Uber bike sharing system. It was very famous and very used because they were all e-bikes. But Uber gave up on the operation and shut it down without any notice, and so people lost that alternative mode. And so I think these types of systems, they need to be better regulated by the municipalities and better integrated onto urban transport systems to be an advantage to the population. Otherwise, they are not very reliable. That would be my intake.
Thank you very much, João. Karin, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just something shortly. I can't say anything about this particular thing, but I think that it highlights the need for good infrastructure for alternatives to the car and to public transport, because I think that when a number of e-bikes and cargo bikes and e-scooters and all these other types of transportation modes that also are driving on often on bike lanes and even in pedestrian areas and things like that, that kind of shows the heterogeneity in these spaces and also potential conflicts. And that was actually something that I wanted to ask this Hans Heinrich, or that is not here, but because he talks about micromobility as one thing. But in my material, for instance, these e-bike commuters, they are kind of, or what they see as the biggest problem in their commuting is most oftenly e-scooters and to a certain extent also cargo bikes, because they take up so much space, and also food delivery on mopeds, like electric mopeds or other fossil fuel mopeds that are also using the same road space. So maybe that is more of the conflict than between Amazon and your type of sharing system. I don't know. It's a reflection.
Thank you very much. I'm just having a look here at the chat. We also have Esther, who's had her hand raised for some time now, and she wants to ask a question or make a comment.
Hi, thank you, Cosmin. Yeah, I've been studying bike sharing for some time now, and my perception, or I want to think, the tendency of the landscape is to add more and more agents or entities or initiatives to the local contexts, and I think this panel kind of reassures me in that. Might not be everywhere, but I think the pandemic and the cycle logistics play a role, the e-scooters as well. So I think we're seeing a scenario in which we have more and more stakeholders. And my question is about, it's very interesting, you know, how these bottom-up initiatives work. And I'm wondering if they can teach something to the local authorities in terms of how to manage these shared mobility, shared electromobility, micromobility initiatives. I'm thinking about the engagement of the stakeholders in itself, governance, and things like that, for example, Kath and Flo have been discussing about. I think they're very important. And yeah, I was just wondering what, you know, can be transferred in the learning of these bottom-up initiatives to local authorities to improve, especially the equity in bike sharing and scooter sharing schemes, electric or non-electric. Yes.
Thank you, Esther. This is a very good question, and it relates to so many other aspects of this platform capitalism, because these companies just come and occupy either the road space or the, I don't know, industry of food deliveries, and then the authorities, municipalities are always a step behind. And it's a very good question how they can learn from more grassroots initiatives, local initiatives, when they address this situation. So many thanks for these questions, and if the panelists here want to share their insights on this, would be great.
Go first.
Sorry?
You wanted to
go
say
ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's for us in Cologne, it's pretty, we get some support from the city, but it's mostly like in the form of a, look here, so here's this project. You know, like there's not, I have the feeling but in other cities it's different. I think sometimes there's not really an interest really in learning, because I mean, we are at least an association here in Cologne, but some initiatives are just a group of friends basically starting out. So we are fighting a lot with like being recognized as a real sharing, like as a sustainable sharing system. It kind of changed by time now that we have so many initiatives, but I think there's still this kind of idea that the thinking is very different in the administration of the city, and how our initiatives work. And they work by people just starting a group, mostly of friends, coming together and saying, okay, we're going to get a bike, we're going to start giving it out. There's not so much required. Yeah, I think that's it from my side.
Thank you, Flo, very much. I'm just thinking that our conference is a bit like that, like going against what most of the cycling conferences are about, and we are this kind of welcoming environment. We don't charge, and why would we fit if we went to ask for public subsidies? I was wondering if João or Karin might want to add to this.
Yeah, I will just like to add that for me, these conflicts between e-scooters, pedestrians and cyclists, I think we are ignoring the elephant in the room. That is that most of our streets, more than 70% of the space is allocated to the car. And so we have to remain in 30% to the pedestrians and cyclists and e-scooters. And I think it's not that we are not looking at the problem is not having e-scooters or bikes, is that we have too much space to the car, and that is something that needs to change. So I think we need e-scooters and bikes and pedestrians, but we need less and less car space in our cities.
Thank you, João. Just having a look at, Karin, did you want to say something as well?
Can I just
Okay.
say?
Yes, please.
I think it's interesting that several people from local authorities have contacted me to ask about how we started up, how we've set up. The problem is, I think, that the staff in local authorities then get moved around, and so the expertise that they might be starting to develop just gets dissipated, which is a real shame. So yeah, I'm sure there is things that they could learn from us, but I don't think they do it in a very good way. But there is a lot of interest in these kind of schemes, and we have had help from our local authority. So yeah,
that's encouraging to hear. Thank you, Kath. I think there was at least one other question, or maybe two, from Graham. If you want to address it to Karin, please, Graham. Can you hear us, Graham? You're on mute. Might have lost him. Maybe we can go to Jackie then, who has a question for everyone, and probably the last 2 minutes we would be able to hear from everyone on Jackie's question here.
Yeah, Jackie here. My question is basically about upskilling or training people to use these different types of bikes. We all have learnt to ride, and there's things about, you know, learning to cycle, but actually learning to, like I'm a mum and I've just got a cargo bike, and it's quite an intimidating thing to use, especially around a city. And I was wondering, like, what role there is in upskilling people to use cargo bikes, and to some extent electric bikes, because they are also different. They're more cumbersome, heavier. I don't know. It's just interesting to sort of like think about the different little challenges that a user experiences with these different bikes. Yeah, and I was wondering if it was something that maybe has become part of Flow's work, or some of the projects that have come from it.
Anyone wants to pick on Jackie's question?
I'll take this, I guess. Yeah, I mean, in Cologne, we have very different types of bikes that are all located at different locations. So today, here at my studio, there was somebody picking up the bike. And I asked him, do you know cargo bikes? Have you ridden this before? Yes, I know. So it was just handing over the key basically, and he went. And then there are other bikes which are more kind of, we have some e-bikes, and there there's a process of when you book it, you get a mail, please come here early. You cannot just go on the street and drive. You have to make a formal education of how to use the bike and how to train it. It really depends totally on the type of the bike, and on what kind of, if the person has experiences, and yeah, what kind of how the location is. You know, some locations are on very difficult streets, I would say, and so they say, okay, go over there, and there you have like a free space to ride around. But it's all very informal and depending really on the bike and the driver.
Okay, thank you, Flo. I think we have to draw to a close this final to last this not last session. Just a quick announcement with regards to special issue on the topics that have been discussed in this session. Esther wants to draw attention to a call that some of you might be interested on.
Yes, thank you, Cosmin. Just very quickly, I've just put in the chat a link to the Active Travel Studies Journal special issue on electric micromobility futures. So it's quite relevant for this panel. And the guest editors are Tim Jones, who is one of our colleagues and friends, very linked to the Cycling and Society Research Group as well. Kiran Chatterjee and Ben Spencer. So I strongly encourage you to have a look at that special issue and in general to the Active Travel Studies Journal, which is an open access, completely open access journal, no fees for publication. And I have the pleasure to be in the board. So if anyone has a question about it, please let me know. And that's the announcement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Esther. That's it for this session. We have a final panel, panel number 5 at 3:30. Oh, 6, sorry, at 3:30. I encourage you to join that one as well. It's not just about Manchester and Manchester-related things. We're going to be making some announcements, some news and upcoming events. So do join us at 3:30. Thank you very much.